Right, folks, I see a lot of people rolling in. This is your host, Greg Warner with MarketSmart, and I'm here with my good pal, my fellow Marylander, Jim Langley. So as we're waiting for you to get settled and such, if you'd like, tell us where you are and how great the weather is or how poor. I know Jim is in Reading, Pennsylvania today.
Yes.
Greg is in Maryland. It's beautiful fall weather here. You can use the chat tool throughout the session. Delta, British Columbia. All right, thank you. And Kelly, Phoenix, twice in one day I get to see you, Kelly. Awesome, thank you. Sterling, a lot of people. North Chicago, it's actually nice and warm in North Chicago. Good for you. All right. Oh my, it's going, Cleveland. My daughter's in Cleveland. Thanks, David. She's over at Case Western University. Yeah. And beautiful fall weather in Shippensburg, PA. Nice. Yeah, I do love the fall weather. So, all right. Well, and folks, I'm going to get the show on the road in a little after the top of the hour. We'll just let a lot of people roll in. There are several hundred that registered. I was surprised we actually had that many because this is a fairly narrow topic, not so general as we usually do it. But yeah, all right. Staunton, Virginia, local. All right, thanks for joining us today. Anna, and you're in Reading. Well, that's where Jim is right now, in a hotel in Reading. So, all right, Carlisle, Massachusetts. It's going to rain up there, huh? All right, yeah. So, folks, as you're joining us, feel free to use the chat tool. It'll get you practiced and ready for the event. I'll get the show on the road in just maybe one more minute so we give people, the latecomers, a chance to join us. Good to see everybody there. Art, good to see you. Bill, yep. I won't say your last names out loud for privacy reasons, but I think you all know who I'm talking about because I know you people. I know a lot of you people.
Same here. So nice to see kindred spirits coming online here.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, if you're ready, I'm ready, Jim. I can get the show on the road.
Ready when everybody is. Yeah, we want to make good use of people's time.
All right. Well, I forgot to get your bio, so that was dumb. But you know what? I'll do a less formal introduction. First, I'll do a little bit of house cleaning. Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Warner. I'm the CEO and founder of MarketSmart, and I'm really, really thrilled to have you here visiting with us today in this webinar, this free event. This one is a little bit different, but I'll get into that in just a minute. So a little bit of house cleaning, or I don't know what you call this, but look, you can raise your hand and you can put questions if you'd like into the question and Q&A tool at I guess it's in the well, whatever they call it, but in the Q&A tool. We may not be answering those questions during the event, but there will be a question and answer session at the very end. So maybe raising your hands at this part is not a very good idea. Maybe save that to the end for the Q&A session. Let's see, if you have any problems or concerns, let us know through the chat tool or the Q&A tool. I have our marketing staff is available. But without further ado, I'll just jump right in. Besides that, is that I'm really pleased to introduce my friend, local friend, Maryland, fellow Marylander I'm fortunate that Jim lives nearby, so from time to time we get together and have coffee. But Jim is what I see as the foremost voice or conscience for the sector, is the way I'd like to introduce you. And in talking to Jim, in fact, when we were out having coffee, I said, Jim, what is it that you really do and recommend to people? Like, how do you make money? So Jim explained it to me and I was like, okay, this is fabulous. Is there any way that you can explain your philosophy and the things that you offer without it being a sales pitch to the rest of our audience? Can you give them a taste and help them do some of it if they perhaps don't have budget to actually hire you? Can you help them along? And Jim agreed. Thank you. And so today, Jim Langley is going to present to you his secret 4-step process. He's not going to give away all his secrets, but he's going to give you at least the outline of how you can reimagine your fundraising operations. So that's all I have to introduce you, Jim, and I'll let you just take it away from here. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Greg. That was very, very generous. I value you and our friendship and look forward to continuing to work on finding better ways to move this field in the right direction, particularly with so many new challenges confronting us. And I'm so appreciative of everyone joining us today. Many of you I know, some of you I don't know well, but I suspect will be kindred spirits by the time this is over, and hope that through the question and answer period, I learn more about how the world looks through your eyes. So I jumped on the chance to do this when Greg put it in the way he did was, yeah, I'm happy to share and happy to share with people who are trying to go about this business in the right way. I really care about the state of philanthropy across the world in North America, and I'm deeply concerned by the loss of trust in institutions and the declining number of giving households in Canada, US, and many other places. Philanthropy is the most beautiful part of human nature to me. And to the extent that is retracting from the support of institutions and organizations, I know is a great concern to us all. So I've been trying to figure that out so that I could advise clients, so that I could use my LinkedIn platform, so that I could use other platforms to say to worthy causes, here's what's going on, let's correct the course, let's find a better way of doing this, let's adapt to these realities so that we can renew and uplift the philanthropic spirit. That animates the hope that we place in the future. It animates the democracies that we're a part of, is this belief that we, the people, can create a more perfect society. And by doing so, in doing so, work through organizations, community-based organizations, institutions. If we lose that, then more dire things will be coming our way. So thank you so much. Now, to make it more practical, as I prepared for this, I thought about my experience as a vice president for 21 years. And quite frankly, my frustration with many consultants who had interesting products and services, but sort of like what they cooked up and wanted me to sell. So if they wanted to sell it, they told me it was important. And in some cases, what they said was important was probably their greatest cash cow, whether it was an analytics package or whether it was a feasibility study, a huge feasibility study. So it was always a little torn, like, is there really a service element here? But what I thought was missing as a sitting vice president, or missing, I think, for any advancement leader, is most of the days I don't have time to think. There's so much expectation parked on our shoulders about producing results. There's expectations about the meetings that we must attend, to make people show that we care about them. There's expectations in the community, all these expectations, and I try to be disciplined and structured. And by the end of every day, I feel like I'm just trying to wring a little bit more out of the day. And what I wanted from a consultant was that perspective of not being in that vortex, and to come in and say, of all the things you could be doing to make your operation more successful in the short, mid, and long term, this is the best use of your time and resources. Of all the things that you could do to create a more sustainable culture, this is the best path forward. So show me the best use of my time, my collective human talent, including me, and the best use of the resources that we have, map that out for me so I know where the right emphasis might be. Well, that didn't happen. And so when I became a consultant, I thought, well, there's the opportunity is to do that. So the 4 steps I'll talk about are right here. So when I think, and I'll go into more detail on each of these. So I kept trying to come up with the right metaphor about what was frustrating me. And I thought, when I looked at who I was when I was a vice president or an advancement official, and I looked at my team, the best members of my team, they were just nose to the grindstone. And sometimes they were working so hard on pleasing, on responding to expectation, delivering on expectation, that they were pushing themselves hard. And I started to worry about them, and I started to worry about me. And I know when I made my greatest mistakes, my lack of judgment was often based on fatigue, on exhaustion. I got grumpy, I got snappish, and I made mistakes, and I said things I wish I hadn't. So I thought, as a consultant, I need to come in and help people understand the allocation of time and resources, and when all you can do is all you can do, when you need to wait and see how people respond, and what you can get rid of, what really isn't that productive, what used to work then but doesn't work now, and what works now. And I knew I had to come up with simple, cost-effective, scalable options for them so that they could keep moving forward. But to my metaphor is, I thought so many of them were so reactive, were working so hard that they weren't minding the health of that advancement operation, and they weren't paying enough attention to the health of the culture itself. And that if either one or both were becoming less healthy, then many other things would be affected going forward: burnout, frustration, tension within the organization, failure to collaborate. So I started thinking about what constitutes a healthy advancement operation and a healthy culture in which an advancement operation works. So we started looking at those places that within their resources do somehow outperform expectations consistently in terms of results produced. And that's not just fundraising results in any year, but other aspects like volunteerism, like actually building community, deepening affinity, et cetera, et cetera. So we started to zero in on what appeared to be the highest functioning or the healthiest organizations. And years ago, I wrote an article in a publication called AGB, in which I talked about the vital signs of a healthy advancement culture or a healthy nonprofit. And based on a lot of study and a lot of analyses, I said those 4 vital signs are the level, depth, and breadth of personal appreciation that people have for you and your mission. So you got to really look for the personal component of all the things that people could be doing and giving to. When we interview them, when we look at their patterns, their behaviors, do they speak to not only I admire what they're doing, but do they say things like, if not for them, or if someone hadn't been there and done what they did, or what they're doing so speaks to my life, to what I've encountered, my deepest held values, what's happened to my loved ones that I cared about. In other words, you started to hear this deeply felt personal testimonial. So it's appreciation, but it held at a very deep level. So to give you an example of that, there are lots of people that say in higher education, for example, well, yeah, I think I got a good education. I think I got a good value for what I paid for. Or even some of them are rah-rah and say, I bleed the school colors. And then people think, well, why aren't they giving more? So the person that we learned who really will be supportive, constructively so, and constructively critical, and stay with them over time, is the person who can state why they're personally appreciative. And they will say things, if that professor had not told me, you're not getting out of this class until you write a decent English sentence, I wouldn't be where I am today. If someone hadn't stepped in and provided me the emotional nourishment when they did, I would not have gotten a degree. If I hadn't had that deep experiential learning opportunity overseas, I wouldn't be a CEO. Oh, when we heard that, we could then say that is that deep level of personal appreciation. So we started creating gradations. Scale of 5 to 0. What levels of appreciation can be found within that community? The second is affiliation. So no surprise to you. I think a lot of you know this. And if you need the study or studies, I can provide them for you. But one I believe was a combination of Fidelity and Volunteer Works that said volunteers give 10 times more than passive donors. Passive donors are just send you the check or make the credit card payment. Volunteers who commit themselves, their time and talent, will give far more treasure. So we started saying, well, let's look at the level of affiliation and the depth of affiliation and see what that indicates and whether it's rising or falling, right? Is it rising or falling? And then a lot of this we could look at numbers. So we have a data set in this assessment. We say, please provide us this data. And we ask for data sets about loyalty, about persistence of loyal donors over decades, about sources of funding, whether they're rising or falling. So what we have is this predictive data set, objective, that compares any organization to the highest functioning ones and looks at the trend lines. So we call those vital signs and we say, where are those vital signs sound? How do we make sure they stay healthy? Where are those vital signs a little worrisome, if not alarming? And how do we alert our clients to the fact you need to pay attention to this or it's going to hurt you in a year or two? You're working so hard on yielding results in the short term, you're going to make results more difficult to get in the mid and long term. So balance that activity a little bit. And here are some practical ways you can build community, scale some volunteer engagement, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a data set that's been refined over years and years and years that allows us to look at it. I'm going to go into more detail about that later, but I want you to know that's where we start. Again, I want to contrast that to where I was approached by many consultants with their pet theory, their pet products, and you have to have this. If you don't have this, you're not going to be successful. And I even liken some of them to deodorant salesmen. You stink. We're going to come in and make you feel bad about what you do until you buy our product. And that really bothered me. So I don't want to say to anybody, you stink. I want to say, you're working really hard. We want to come alongside you. You don't have enough resources. We want to help you find within your resources how to work more productively. And we want you to take care of yourself and your team so you can sustain a reasonable pace over a long time. So we do the assessment on vital signs and we do a findings and recommendations report. Then out of that, we say, based on your unique person, right? We don't bring pet theories in or preconceived products and services or off-the-shelf products. We then can customize. We can say, all right, you're unique. And just as every individual is unique, every organization is unique in space, in time, in history, in the culture that was inherited, based on recent controversies, based on turnover in leadership, based on, so many factors. So any product or service that attempts to say, this is for all of you, isn't for all of you. It's only in doing an assessment can we come up with a prescriptive plan. Of course, we don't do that by ourselves. We show you the data. We show you how it compares with peer institutions. And we say something's slipping or you're over-reliant on certain strategies here, and it looks like they're faltering. So we come alongside and say, does this make sense to you? And then out of that, our clients select sometimes all of our recommendations, and then we agree on the priority that we will pursue those. And then the next step is then as you seek to improve all of those vital signs, appreciation, affiliation, agency, that means belief in your ability to make a difference. Donors believe that if they give to you, you can make a difference. And by the way, if they don't believe your business plan is sound, if something is occurring that's making you less viable, they're going to be very leery about making significant investments in you. So we're always worried when clients just talk about institutional need, or even talk about if we don't get a certain amount of funding, we're in trouble. Whatever you get in the short run, you've lost donor confidence by calling into question how sustainable your underpinning business plan is. So we try to say, be careful, because the greatest value you offer to a donor is agency. If you give us $1 million, here's what we can do with it. Here's how we can sustain it. If you give not just to us, but through us, here are the significant societal impacts that we can make, right? So, and then the last one is accountability. After you get that, are you proving to be accountable? So we come up with a prescriptive plan. We make a series of findings and recommendations. The client accepts some, most, or all. And then we come up with a quarter by quarter plan for implementing. But then as we talk about reaching out to the third point, we try to disabuse everybody of single approaches, and particularly some single phenomenon, which is so artifactual and outdated, like a single case for support. So I say to people like, have you been in Starbucks lately? Do you see any successful coffee shop just offering coffee? Do you see any customers just coming in and asking just for coffee? Not many. Walk down the aisles of a grocery store and look at how a single product has 18, 20 different options, flavorings. The point being, we're in a highly segmented society, and all successful businesses say to maintain market share, we have to give customers, or in this case, donors, choices. So what's working is not a single case for support, but an overarching mission declaration, and then various ways of advancing mission milestones, projects or initiatives that talk about specific outcomes, preferably in 2 years, maybe as long as 5 years, and then relate the amount to be raised or the amount requested to a particular impact. So we have clients that we work very closely. I'm going to sit down with this donor and say, for every $1 million you give for this, we're going to shoot for these deliverables, these outcomes. Shoot for, it's not perfect, because experiment. But if you look at what we've done up to this point, if you look at what we've done with the funds we have every reason to believe that we can convert that next $1 million into this performance, this outcome, and we should sustain it, right? So we show them how to start customizing all of their communications, and particularly when it comes to fundraising. But the customization of communications could be in affiliation itself. So we use phrases like portals of purpose, and we say large organizations can't think about single umbrellas, come in and be an annual fund donor, come in and be a part of an alumni association, come in and be, whatever your big inducement is. But what you really have to do is think of yourself as a big nonprofit with a series of small nonprofits attached, right? So you got to be much more like United Way, where you're facilitating, the umbrella organization is facilitating the work of a lot of smaller nonprofit enterprises subsumed within. So the donor can go, oh, thank you. I was just giving a keynote address this morning, and I was talking about donor motivation. And so I just picked one person out of the audience randomly, and I said, to which cause or purpose do you give the most and why? And she said, I give the most to United Way of Berks County. I thought, that's interesting. Why? She said, I like their early reading program. You see what just happened there? I give to the United Way of Berks County, but not to everything and all things, but because of all the things they do, I saw this early reading program that lit me up and made me want to give. So I write the check to them, but you see, I found my portal of purpose. And I said, well, why is that so important to you? And she said, I get to read to young people. Donor experience. You see, it's not only customized according to thematics, but now what they've done is allow her to give, and I get to. They're giving her the experience that money can't buy, a customized service that she takes great delight in. And you see, she's reading with children, and she's finding such joy in it. She's going to renew, she's going to give more if she has the means. Nobody needs to be chasing her down and talking to her about re-upping in the next annual fund. You see, it's this customization. Then I dug a little bit deeper, and I said, well, why is that so important to you? Of all the things you could be giving to, She said, well, I struggled with reading comprehension when I was a child. Ah, it's personal. So look at all those things that we just learned from that little exchange is when people give, it's deeply personal and we don't learn the why. So what we try to do is get our clients to say, look, customize, take that big broad theme. Let's think about customized products and services within that, portals of purpose, concept papers that start to appeal to donors' pronounced giving sensibilities, and offer the array and watch how people align. If we're going to do a feasibility study, let's give donors choices. We're going to talk to you about X institution. Here are 5 or 6 major initiatives, and here are 5 or 6 planks within that initiative. Would you like an overview document, or would you like to spend time with us talking about one of those or a couple of those? So already we're starting the dialogue around what people care about. So we got to get away from the single umbrella, the single plank, the single document, the single brochure, and think about ways of doing this. And by the way, you don't have to pour a lot of money into it because high content, low gloss is working. People want content. They don't want frippery. They don't want you to spend a lot of money. As a matter of fact, they like when you come to them with a simple presentation that says, it's early stage. We can pretty it up later, but here's where we are now, and here's what we're thinking about. They like that. And then finally, as you start to use more volunteers, as you start to push out more ideas, then you've got to systematize how you do that. And I'm going to share what I mean by systematize in just a minute. But let's just go into a little bit more detail here so that you have this PowerPoint and I leave you with a bit more detail. What are some of the things? As Greg said, I'm not going to give you everything, but what would we look at to ascertain your philanthropic health? The percentage of individual giving and how it maps against individual giving in the US or in Canada or whatever country you're in. The persistence of individual giving, in other words, not just the number of donors that you have each year, but your ability to retain donors year over year, if not decade over decade. So we want to see this ability to hold people over a long time and to keep doing that in the face of growing competition. That's going to speak volumes to us and then suggest strategies to strengthen or to leverage the strength that you've already developed, right? We're going to watch out very much for growing dependencies. And one of the ones that concerns me greatly across most nonprofits, certainly in higher education, is a growing dependency on grants and foundations. Good for them that they'll give you the money, but while you're doing that, not attending to individual relationships and letting the biggest portion of the philanthropic pie, 79% of which in the US comes from individuals, failing to attend to that because grants are easier to get. You just crank out a proposal because some corporations will give more quickly if they see self-interest in what you're doing. Get it fast, get it easy. I know there has to be a portion of us that has to be opportunistic, but I will submit to you that it is that unrelenting pursuit of low-hanging fruit that has depleted our philanthropic orchard and has left us all vulnerable. It is that pursuit of the low-hanging fruit that has caused the US to lose 1/3 of the giving households in a 30-year period of time. When I started in my career, 74% of giving households gave. Today, it's 49.6. I will submit to you that that terrible loss of philanthropic capacity comes from this obsession with the low-hanging fruit. And if it isn't coming back to haunt you now, I promise with my deepest convictions it will. And I'll promise you as a friend who doesn't care whether you buy anything I offer, that you've got to attend to the rebuilding and re-nurturing of that philanthropic orchard, or in 5, 8, 10 years, you're just going to have fewer, older, wealthier people keeping you alive. You're going to look like that well-appointed church that's got some blue hairs in the front rows that are keeping the minister there and keeping the church looking nice. But as you look around the church, you're not going to see many mentally aged people, and you're not going to see many young people crossing the threshold. You're going to keep the structure and the organization alive, but the cause around which you were founded is withering, and it will wither to a point where it'll be very difficult to turn it around. We're going to look at the number of volunteers that you have and how effective they are. We're going to look at the rate of volunteer giving. We know that if you have well-chosen volunteers and you're giving them juicy work to do, we know what percentage in general will give and give generously. And if we see falling from that benchmark, we know there's one of two problems. You didn't choose your volunteers well, or you didn't give them very good work to do. What's the principal complaint of volunteers? Too much of my time, too little of my talent. We're going to look at the number of donors year over year and see if the number of donors is decreasing while dollars are increasing or dollars are holding their own. And we're going to run that out for you and do some extrapolations and tell you when it's going to feel like you're in the middle of the Gobi Desert and you don't know where the oasis is. And then we're going to look at rate of donor contact. You tell us who your top prospects are, and we're going to look at the rate of contact and say, wow, if these are the people we're dating and we're going to ask to marry, it sure doesn't look promising if we're only seeing them twice a year. We're only interacting with twice a year. And maybe you're relying too much on events and putting on big splashes and not relying on the fuel of the fuel of the healthiest relationship, which is conversation, listening, exploring together, simple conversation. Here you are putting on shows, golf tournaments, galas, events, wow, big stuff, but you're not sustaining conversation in which unfolding discovery of shared purpose is taking form and deepening the bond between us, okay? What else do we know? Then with vital signs, then we come forward, as I said, with this assessment, and we tell you what your levels of appreciation are versus high functioning organization. And yes, people appreciate you for the good deeds you do, but do they feel personally connected and valued by it, or do they just feel you're pumping out this propaganda? So we're going to look for, I appreciate them, and I feel appreciated by them. So we get, yeah, they're doing good work, but do you feel appreciated by them? No. Again, a recent survey we saw, lots of alums appreciate the education they receive, but don't feel appreciated by alma mater. And you know where they critically, in most cases, say they really don't care? It's about my career. Care about my giving. They don't care how I'm doing my career. They don't care about the talent I've accrued. They don't seem to think that's valuable or want it back. So you see there's a little bit of a hope there that alma mater is truly alma mater, nourishing mother, and saying, tell us about your career. It's wonderful what you've achieved. We hope we were a part about it. We hope we're a part of it, and hope that you'll share that. They feel the loss of that. And I'm sure there are corollaries in other areas. As if I'm important to you, why is my talent not important to you? And then when you hear high enthusiasm and high affiliation, I'm doing what I love. Remember that phrase, I get to do something I love. They're not wining and dining me. I can buy my own wine. I don't need them to buy me a nice dinner, but they're giving me such joy by allowing me to do something I couldn't otherwise do. Then we look at agency, mission optimization. Do you feel that your giving was put to good use? Again, what do surveys and studies show? I feel donors saying, I feel adequately thanked, but underinformed as to the impact of my investment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But see, they keep saying, but did I make a difference? But did I make a difference? So we're going to go ask them again, and that's lurking in the back of their mind. Did I make a difference? Did I make a difference? So we're going to tell you where you are and how strongly they feel about agency. And by the way, we can do this both with high net worth donors, and we can do this in survey of rank and file donors, including annual fund donors. And we can put the two pieces together because we know what to ask. We know how to peel away and get to the sort of deeper psychological truth, and then come back to you and say, this is what's really happening, and this is what you need to account to. This is what you need to face up to. And then accountability. Do they feel that you're accountable to your founding mission? Do they feel that you're accountable to them personally? Do they feel you're sort of accountable to the community? You see, if I'm thinking about giving again or giving larger, or if I'm late in life and I'm trying to decide who deserves the lion's share of my estate, I can tell you of somebody of that age, here's what you struggle with. One, what did life teach me to be most important? Two, which organization is the most likely to live that purpose out, to take what I've learned and help other people benefit from what I've learned, right? But three, who is going to care about donor intent after I've gone? They're going to take my money and use it for what they want, or are they really going to care about my backstory, my purpose, and say, this is what Jim cared about. We're going to log it into our books, and anybody who attempts to expend that money has to show us that they're spending it for what he thought was most important. And how am I going to determine that? By the organization that did the best job of asking me why I gave. Remember my little anecdote earlier? But why is early reading important to you? If nobody asked me why I gave the way I gave, am I going to believe they're a good steward after I'm gone? And conversely, if they did, if they kept reinforcing that, if they kept showing me how funds were expended to preserve the why, my purpose, they're set up quite nicely when I make that decision about where will my life and my life story make a difference. By the way, I just saw a report, I think it's from Philanthropy USA. It was on LinkedIn. I haven't had time to run it down, but they came to the same conclusion. They did a study of various organizations and their donors, and they said the big takeaway is why people lose donors or suboptimize the potential of the donors, according to the donors, is they never gave me a chance to tell my story. We keep talking about storytelling. It's not insignificant. I don't mean to offend that. I don't mean to poo-poo that. But you see what we're advocating is story listening, then acting on story in such a way where you make me feel that you're making my story a part of your story, and we're working on the same quest going forward. That's the real story, okay? So then the prescriptive plan is to strengthen the vital signs, short, mid, and long-term goals within the resources they have. And we know that that always starts with defining the most immediate giving potential. So as we look within, we know you have to show results to buy time to do things the right way. So we can look at data, trends, inclining, declining. We can look at what we know about when people give at stages in life, when other stimuli are present. We can look at factors like recency of giving, ascent of giving, et cetera, and say, here's a group that is most worthy of your attention. And sometimes it surprises them because it's often people they overlook who are giving loyally but modestly. And I don't have time to tell you, but there's all kinds of things we're missing in there that are incredibly important. But in the Q&A, I'll try to do that. But it's worth a deeper analysis, and anybody who's good at data analysis knows how important this loyalty is, and then looking within loyalty a little bit more to see there's different kinds of loyalty, and there's a kind of loyalty that remains under potential because you didn't seek the story, right? So lots of hidden nuggets there that we miss in our formulaic approach and our pursuit of obvious low-hanging fruit, but some of the things that we think are low-hanging fruit are mythical, are chimeric, if you know that word. They appear promising, but they're not. All right. So then, where can you make greater differences? What can you do? And we often focus on the importing of more talent. So we go, wait a second, volunteers give more. Well, we don't have enough staff. We can't do this. There's a huge engagement opportunity. Well, wait a second, how do we need it? We don't have a volunteer coordinator. Well, get 3 volunteers, give them an hour's task. Whoever does the task well, give them a couple more hours. If they do that well, see if there'll be a volunteer coordinator for you. But then that's where you get to the templatizing. So one of the most important things that volunteers can do for us is what? What did I just say? Start interviewing donors about the why of their giving. People love to do this. If you don't have enough staff to do this, recruit volunteers and tell them you're going to talk to current donors. We're just going to listen to them about why they gave to this organization and what their backstory, where did this come from in their personal story. So we start getting more volunteers to do this. Volunteers, when met with moving backstories coming from philanthropic people, want to do more. And if they feel they're a good interviewer, or they get positive feedback, like the person being interviewed said, I'm so touched that you cared about this and you spent time, you create this positive reinforcement and you can build volunteer capacity. So we try to give you simple, practical solutions to do that. But we're trying to build constituent capacity. Why? Your philanthropic orchard, if it's like 99 out of 100 we're seeing, has got aging trees that will be less fruitful and some trees that simply have died and you haven't replaced them because you focus so much on the most fruitful trees, and that singularity of purpose has left you in trouble in coming years. So we start saying, here's how you build capacity. Again, through conversation, through wonderful dialogue about when did this value set start to form in you? When did you start to act on it? When did you recognize us? When did we recognize you? Conversation about mutual discovery is the most overlooked form of engagement. And we keep going back to these big gassy events. We want to shoot off fireworks rather than sit in a corner with somebody and say, is my theory right that you may have care about cardiovascular care because you lost somebody dear to you, and watch what happens, right? And the other thing that we try to get them to do is this importance of donors will give more when they think you're solvent. And so are you trying to get private donors to do everything, but are you thinking about total resource development? Are you looking at all sources of funds, current and potential? Are you telling donors that you've got this kind of funding here that if leveraged by 10% would allow you to do 10% more? People are leaving an incomplete story and not telling the most compelling story by thinking in corridors of giving. We have to go to private donors about philanthropy. We have to go to corporate donors about corporations. We have to, not talk about governmental grants because no. It's the totality of these things all coming to bear to advance the mission that excites people about being involved, because more can be done. My time will make a greater difference and my investment will make a greater difference, okay? So again, we just pound on, and I wrote a whole parable on the myth of the low-hanging fruit. I really do think this metaphor is apt. Ladies and gentlemen, if it isn't evident to all of you, and I suspect it is, can we stop saying low-hanging fruit? Can we banish that from our vocabulary? The fact that people believe that to be true, down to 49.6% of American households giving, while the number of nonprofits increases by 100% every decade. What low-hanging fruit? And can we give up phrases like the public phase of our campaign? What public? Who's sitting there waiting for you to go public? It's only the community you've built. It's only the constituency you've nurtured. Can we start giving up on that there's this formula that we can apply that will make magical things happen, versus there is a way, if we attend to it, to grow a wonderful, beautiful orchard that will be a part of, that will be delight in being amid, and that we'll be able to see bear fruit long after we're gone. It's that kind of husbandry, that nurturing of looking beyond our time to create something that will serve us well. There's just been too little of it. And guess what? Anybody who's generous in any way, who gives away time or talent, even on webinars. I think Greg and I and other of my colleagues out there say, we give a lot on LinkedIn. We give a lot of pro bono work. We give away a lot of advice. We don't charge people for everything we do. And it comes back to us. It comes back to us in the short run, because people say, that's good. That must be a good person. That must be an admirable company, right? In the same way, we got to get past this sort of obsessive fear about something terrible going on in the short run, when it's the long run we should be fearing much more. Stop being so maniacal and panicky about, next year, next 3 months. And I know people say it's not us, Jim, it's what's being visited on us. But the more of us that speak up and say, no, we're confident, and if we do these things, we'll see a greater rate of return next year and the year beyond, right? And this addiction to desperation, it becomes a downward spiral. It becomes a vortex out of which you can't get. The more consumed we become with the short run and the less we attend to the orchard, the harder it is to get out of it. So desperation begets desperation. We got to be careful about that downward spiraling vortex. So we come in and go, okay, even under these circumstances, as tough as they are, as bad as your boss may be, as unreasonable as your board may be, here's how you can start to creep your way out a day at a time. Here's a ray of hope. Here's a way to start moving in that direction. And if you start to see little rays will start to add up to big rays. But you've got to carve out just a little bit of every day to move in this direction and do it, whether anybody gets it, supports it or not. You'll see it. And when people see things happening, they'll listen to you more closely, right? So we say there is this more certain way to philanthropic health based on everything we've learned. It's not about us, what we've learned from other firms, what we've learned from healthy organizations, what we learned from heroic practitioners. We try to bring it all together. I'm going to turn this into a Q&A here in just a few minutes, but give you just a little bit more to follow up on. So this is what I said before. We've got to get past, this reliance, and particularly on sort of high gloss, branded materials. I'm not negating the importance of brand, but brand is best evinced in consistency of behavior, not in cute phrases, in the way every ambassador of the institution exhibits the same commitment to cause. That's brand, right? That's brand. It isn't something we put on a brochure and nobody really behaves that way. Brand is behavior personified, right? So get past that and start looking for ways of appealing different genders, different generations. And again, we're seeing, people falling away, and we're seeing it very difficult to get post-baby boom generations coming in because we're still playing to them like they're us, and they're not. They're different. Let them be who they are and embrace them who they are. And so what we have to do is create this library of difference-making opportunities, and then start going to donor and mapping our difference-making opportunities with their convictions, with their hopes, with where they want to make a difference. So such that there's never a pitch in an early presentation, there's an exploratory interview. And then we come back saying, if you cared about this teens, we'd like you to see this early stage initiative. Or if you cared about economic development, we'd like you to take a look at this. If you care about workforce development, teachers or nurses, we'd like you to see what we're trying to do here, right? And a simple concept paper. We test should be 4 pages there. Sorry, that's my mistake. What we look for, we help clients start conversations with 4-page drafts. We say, keep it to 4 pages, and we just broach the idea. And then we go in with an inkling that this person cares about it. And we say, here's a 4-pager, it's marked draft. What do you think? So we can then tell people, yeah, there's a way to maintain greater contact and diversify your fundraising options. And you don't have to kill yourself. But what we got to do is do more careful thinking about where differences can be made if you secure levels of investment. So we try to get people to understand this by saying, elicit before you solicit. Listen, elicit what's important to them, their backstory, what they're trying to achieve with their life, and then come back to them. We can show people how to produce a different kind of product and service that's very scalable, very cost effective, because all it is bond paper, right? Nicely presented, thoughtfully presented, but there's nothing fancy about it. High content, low gloss. That's where we're winning the day on securing lots of funding for lots of initiatives, right? And then customize according to reaction. So you start with a draft paper that you share with 20 people, but if they react in 10 different ways, you can then customize from there. You're just working with documents, right? So you see this customization till you ultimately find my sweet spot, and my fitting and my story fitting in your story and us being in the quest together. This is how we do it. It just naturally gets to that point as that conversation unfolds. But we'll all have to offer more portals of purpose for more people to find themselves in this larger community of kindred spirits. Now, the systemization, let me talk about this because this is so important. The old way of doing things was to send out people and say, go qualify somebody as a donor. Never mind the hubris of going out and saying, we're going to qualify whether we think you're worthy of our time. Never mind that, he said sarcastically, when I want to puncture holes in the way things were done. But now think about discovering donors' passions, not qualifying them. You can't just go out and say, let us talk to you about our nonprofit. What do you have to do? You qualify them according to something you might do. So we go back to the concept papers and say, we just don't want to qualify them as a donor in the abstract. We want to show them some of the things that we're doing that we care about and see if we can qualify them according to how they resonate, how they react, and where do they react most enthusiastically. You see, then we can get something done that's quite productive, right? We must test an initiative to actually qualify a donor. But you see, to do that, you have to have a systematic approach. You have to have a templated interview so that when you go ask donors reactions, yes, you're going to ask a reaction to a specific document, but you're going to record how they reacted, but you're going to have an interview template that anybody can use so that when we come back, we record that information in a critical way. If we're going to use volunteers to do some outreach and stewarding for us, or do that asking of why, we've got to give them an interview template and a toolkit. This is what you ask, this is how you record, and this is how you file your report. You see, if you don't, you'll scare people to death. If you say, we want your help in raising money, people will run for the hills. But if you say, there's this wonderful thing we've discovered that when we get people to tell us why they gave to us, this beautiful story unfolds. They feel valued. We feel we now know how to work with them in the future. And we've got that down to, a brief interview that could be administered in 30 minutes. How many people would like to do that, particularly if we give you the interview template, if we give you the way to score the interview on a scale of 1 to 5, almost like a ballot, a mail-in ballot, and then you just, either enter it electronically or how you want. Just send it back to us one way or the other. Oh, well, I could do that, right? So we start to magnify. We actually build community by getting more people doing what's most important to us to build community. We start recruiting donors themselves to help us build community. But you've got to have that systematized. To leave that to the subjective judgment of individual gift officers is something I did too much of and had too little to show for it. Some were brilliant, some I'm forever grateful for, but some never really came back with insight or overpromised and underdelivered. So I thought, well, what good coach would say, just go out there and run whatever pass pattern you want? Or what would coach would sort of say, run an offensive play that comes to mind versus here's what we know works. Let's all work on this game plan. Yes, there could be some improvisation, but for us to succeed as an organization, we all have to be committed to the systemization of what we do. And we certainly, where systemization is critically important, is intelligence gathering. When you interact with donors, when you listen to donors, and before you file a report, we need that systematized such that if you go to greener pastures, if you leave, if you turn over, just about anybody can come in and pick up the conversation and pick up the relationship. All right. It's critical as the rate of turnover, of fundraising turnover increases. It's critical to internal collaboration that we're all sharing, gathering information, and saying how we interpret so we can start working as teams. And more scientific information and greater use of behavioral science will make us all better. All right, I tried to pack in there. I hope I didn't speak too quickly, but let's open the mics and open the platform to see if I can be helpful, more helpful to you. What's pressing? And Greg, do you want to moderate that for us?
Yeah. There's a couple of questions. And by the way, this is the part where you get to ask questions. But for now, before I jump into that, I'm going to just give you a quick 1-2 of what MarketSmart does, by the way, is that we essentially help provide these portals of purpose at scale. So what we do is we help with the systemization portion of what Jim's been talking about. And this is just an example with the University of Texas. For instance, is, as Jim was saying, you've got to ask people why they care. You've got to ask them what portals of purpose, if you will, they're interested in. And then you've got to cultivate the relationship and score them and such. So we do everything that Jim's talking about, but we we come in at the systemization stage where, for instance, and this is just for a part of a capital campaign where they're raising money for endowment scholarships, scholarships. And the minimum is really $100,000 at this stage of the campaign. So this is a digital way, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but at the end, basically they get a page that is, and you can see it's got my name on there. I said that in their survey that I wanted to name my scholarship, the Warner Scholarship. And then here are the portals of purpose that I selected. There were a dozen, but I selected these, and then they can learn more. Of course, our AI is also going to send them automated emails over the course of time throughout the campaign to nurture the relationship and send them more content that's related to what they were interested in. So again, what we do is we scale what Jim's talking about, and then basically our system scores each donor based on what they're interested in and what they said and how much money they wanted to give and all that. Described, it's a donor-driven system is really what it is. It's not about well screening. It's about letting the donors self-navigate, and you can see they're all red because these leads are rolling in essentially as we speak. All right, enough about MarketSmart. I'll stop my sharing and we'll jump into the questions. But of course, if you are interested in operationalizing this kind of concept, talk to us. If you're interested in learning how to develop these portals of purpose, we hope that you'll reach out to Jim. So I'm going to start out with the first question here. So how do you create portals of purpose when leadership wants unrestricted funds? Won't this lead to more restricted giving?
Yes, and so this is where you can't defy market phenomenon, right? So what if management wants to sell Etzels? What's the answer to that? Market isn't buying it. Look at where money is going. So the alternative is if you go after unrestricted, you're going to spend more time and more talent going after the least likely phenomenon. What you have to do is find other ways of getting at unrestricted. So for instance, you could tuck a cost of business into one of these big ideas, right? I'm not talking about an overhead, an administrative overhead. I'm simply talking about if you have an initiative, you have to factor in the cost of the physical plant. You have to factor in the cost of utilities. You have all those things that you're spending unrestricted on. It's a different way of thinking where you're going to the donor with the blandest part of the philanthropic equation. Help us with overhead. You're asking for subsidization. Ask them for mission optimization. And in those packages, in those proposals you produce, simply factor in what the institutional cost is for executing that. You see what I'm saying? You take unrestricted money and you turn around and use it for that purpose. Start looking at what you're using unrestricted money for and put that into the marketplace, right? But then put it in the context of greater difference to be made. You see, I don't blame you. This is the question. Believe me, questioner, I don't blame you. This is all too common. But I startle people by saying, go into your CAE reports and look at how many unrestricted endowment gifts or $1 million or more were given in recent years. 15, 18. You want more unrestricted money as you want needles in the philanthropic haystack. And you're going to lose following, volume of giving, and you're going to miss big giving opportunities because you want what you want and donors don't feel like you're meeting them where you are. This is this example. We see this growing gap between what institutions want from donors and what donors want from institutions, that mindset is going to create a wider gap and real fundraising inefficiency.
I'm going to add that that is precisely why donors are giving to donor advised funds and individual or family
Yes.
foundations. Okay, so this concept or this desire among leadership and board members for unrestricted giving is actually driving people to other
That's it.
products where the donor feels that they get the value they want, period.
And Greg, there's this question about you don't have to declare it as administrative overhead. That's the wrong nomenclature. It's the cost of executing the project, which is a very real cost. You're not making anything up. You're saying, let's prorate, like you do your income tax return. How much of your home space is used for business? You prorate it. So how much to execute this new initiative of existing resources will we have to use? We don't have time now, but there's lots of other strategies for building unrestricted income through other sources like estate giving, like plowing back, like a small surcharge on even restricted endowments, which the courts have held to be legal. So if you have certain endowment earnings, even from restricted, you can take a fraction and plow it back into unrestricted endowment because you got to preserve the place to do what you promised to do to individual donors. This sort of getting to donors, what our most immediate concern is, precludes you from getting them to give what your greatest potential could be.
Yeah, I should tell you also, I hope you can stay over the time and I hope you all will continue. It's kind of getting hot now. People are actually asking more questions. So I'm going to kind of just keep rolling with the Q&A because these are actually really insightful questions. So Jim, can you give us an extra 10 minutes?
Yeah, let me send a text here while I'm going. So I'll ask somebody to hold for 15 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for this. I may not be able to get to all these questions, but I will share them with Jim. So, and by the way, I'll start with one that's about wealth screening from, let's see here. Somebody asked a question, Tim, curious as to your thoughts on the value of wealth screening of donors. And the reason why I'm going to start with that while you're texting is because I'll give you my 2 cents. Is that it's a component of the process, perhaps, but too often what happens with that data is it just gets left on the shelf and nobody does very much with it. It's kind of a curious thing. It's neat to spy on your donors, but you have to ask yourself the question of like, what would they think if they saw what you had on them? So, I mean, I'm biased because the system that I built and developed is all donor driven. We prioritize supporters and we capture their portals of purpose, as Jim calls it, from the donor. And they opt in to tell you all that information of how wealthy they are and how they want to give assets. So I personally just think that's the more fair way to go. But it's very hard for me to tell everybody to just stop doing what traditionally has been done. So
Greg, I would just add, do it very selectively. It's not the first way you determine, right? You look at donors and you can actually go in and see what donors have given to. So it's not their wealth, it's the percentage of their wealth that's going to be that they're giving to philanthropy, right? So there are billionaires that give modest amounts and there are people that make $50,000 a year that are incredibly philanthropic, you see. So observe the behavior, which is how generous they are within their means. It's their rate of giving anywhere that will be predictive of their future giving. Then if you want to dig in a little bit more, if you see kind of spectacular giving to say, what's that capacity? I would do that, but I do it very selectively. It'd be my 4th step, not my 1st step.
Exactly. I 1000%. Look, without motivation, people call it inclination. It's really motivation. There is no gift, and motivation occurs from life story events in the past, individual values that have been developed over time, and people involved in their lives. So you need to understand their story, is what I'm saying, before you do wealth screening. Anyway, I'll jump to Robert writes, it's very long, so I'll just read the question. A lot of organizations are deploying younger, newer fundraisers out in the field to have conversations when they might not have the experience to add nuance to their conversations to learn a donor's why. Do you have any suggestions for working with our less experienced peers and helping them develop necessary conversational skills?
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's such a good point, right? We're trying to do it on the cheap. So, well, look for young people with deep curiosity. That's huge, right? So I was in my career when I was a vice president the first time, I was 37 and I looked young. And so people said, does he have enough experience and wisdom to sit down with people with gray hair? Well, I was so natively curious that that's what struck people, was I was so genuine. But I would say to that question is, really make that a criteria for hiring people, evidence of it, see for yourself and look at evidence of it, and then give them those templates, such that the curious then can benefit from what people with deep experience have learned about the right phrasing of questions and the right order of questions.
Brilliant. And by the way, Helene writes, will the slides be available? And yes, they will be. We'll be emailing you the recording and the slides in a day or so. All right, next is, what do you do about donors who insist on not having any of their money used for admin?
That's what I'm saying is, don't call it admin. Show them the project cost. Don't pull that out separately. Simply prorate what needs to be spent. In other words, there's got to be some cushion in there, but meaning admin is, they think it's going to what? The president, or it's just going to this bureaucracy. So even the terminology is wrong. Like unrestricted is a terrible thing to put in front of donors. Unrestricted, wahoo, wild parties versus what? Institutional strength building? I don't know, something much better than unrestricted. So it isn't administrative overhead. It's simply, if they're, how did you arrive at these costs is, here's the budget, here's how we put it together. And then you can defend, there's a footprint, there's utilities needed, there's travel, I don't know, whatever it is that's needed. And by the way, would they want you to launch something new that was undercapitalized and put their name on it so that it became mediocre? You see, it's the way we tell the story. You're going to put your name on it, you're funding it, we want it to be high achieving and make high impact. So in this budget, we want you to know we've tried to present you a budget that isn't so, so scant, we don't believe that we can do it well, nor is it luxurious. We think it's an honest budget.
I'll add that Dr. Russell James likens admin and other objects, if you will, to Thor's hammer. So if anybody likes Marvel comics, Thor is really not very powerful without a hammer, right? So if you think the donor is Thor, well, Thor needs a hammer. Well, admin is the hammer.
Yeah.
It makes the donor more powerful.
Yeah.
All right, so Catherine writes, what have been the biggest challenges you faced in implementing this shift in thinking, systems, and structure in large organizations such as universities?
Yeah, that they are change resistant. So, have they had, you look for it in the RFP and the early engagement. Have they had an epiphany? Are they struggling with something? Are they frustrated with results? And, what I would propose to do with a large organization is not try to get them to turn on a dime, but say, let us run a few experiments for you. Let's take a program, let's take a promising faculty member and show you what we mean. So a quick example for a university, just how I try to get people to do some side example. One of my clients just won a $15 million grant for addressing health inequities, right? What did we just learn from COVID-19? Who gets clobbered? So I said, can we sit down with the faculty team and ask them what they do with an additional 15 million? Because we know a lot of donors care about addressing health inequities. And if they can't tell me what to do with more 15 million, I won't put it in front of donors. But if they come up with a really compelling narrative of how they can scale that thing and juice it up and help a whole lot more people, hundreds, if not thousands of people, for sure, we're going to go to donors who already care about that and say, we got 15 million from the feds. If you give us 15 million, we're going to show you $30 million impact in 3 years.
Excellent. So there's a lot of kind comments that I'll forward to you later. I think we really just have one question left, although there is one person here who wrote, Jennifer, but I'm not giving out last names, by the way, but Jennifer wrote, I do what Jim is talking about. Cost of doing business. It works.
Yay, Jennifer.
Yeah. So let's see here. I think, well, there's actually more questions, but unfortunately, I think we're just going to wrap it up on this one.
I mean, people can contact me personally. They can post something on LinkedIn and comment on a section. I'll do my best I can. I'll pick them off as I can. But, if we are kindred spirits, let's keep this conversation alive in any way we can. I value your time. I love this portion of Q&A and trying to listen to you and learn from you and be helpful. So we can do it by email, by, LinkedIn, by anything. But let's support one another. If we're all frustrated, let's support one another and share best practice. And let's create a critical mass such that the powers that be keep hearing about a different school of thought. Let's make it inescapable.
Ditto. All right. Well, thank you, Jim, for your brilliance. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's event. And hope to see you soon, everybody, again. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.